want to fend for myself, and I want to build people up for them to fend. Hey everybody, Clark Fredericks with another edition of the Free Like Me podcast. Guests come on, speak their truth, and walk out of here free like me. Just trying to remove that shame from people. You know, shame keeps us stuck in that hole, and we got to get out of that hole, and talking about it is how you dig yourself out. So reach out to me if you want to be a guest on the show. If you want to be part of my coaching program, reach out, and we'll do a consultation call and get you set up. And I keep mentioning every week, my book Scarred is due out July 29th. I just feel it's going to change lives. It's going to inspire people. It's going to give hope back to people. So it's available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon. It's up for pre-orders. Head over there and pre-order a copy. It comes out July 29th. And this week we have Kimberly with us. Kimberly is a beautiful woman, and you would look at her. She's a nurse, and you would think, you know, she's got it all going on, but she would not be a guest on this show if she hadn't gone through the mud first to have it all going on. So we're going to hear about Kimberly's life. So stay tuned. Miss Kimberly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah. We've followed each other on Facebook for a while. And I think I just asked, I saw you post like, I don't know, something about addiction or something. And then I think I reached out to you and said,
No,
hey,
I reached out to you.
Oh, it was you? I couldn't remember.
So my girlfriend sent me the soft white underbelly. And at the end of it, I was in tears, and I'm like, bravo for sharing your pain so other people can heal. And I reached out to you and I said, thank you. I said, thank you so much for sharing your story, because, you know, you healing loudly is so that other people silently don't have to suffer. And so I was so moved, and you're like, thanks, Kimberly.
Yeah. You know, every time somebody shares their story, you know, if they're helping one person, you know, it's just a domino effect, you know.
Exactly. That's what I found in recovery, is that when you share your pain, your struggles, and your successes, there's connection. And when you can connect through something tragic, you can help someone heal. And so it's probably the most dynamic and healing thing for me as a nurse. And just watching people heal. Addiction's the only disease you can suffer from that in a program of recovery, you are exponentially a better human being. You can't say it about diabetes. You can't say it about heart disease. You can't say it about cancer. You can't say they're exponentially better human beings. But you can in addiction. And so it's a beautiful thing to watch. And, and just any trauma healing.
You know, I had a Episcopal priest on here, and, you know, I opened up by saying, you know, I bet you were raised in the perfect family. You know, you were the Beaver Cleaver household. You've never drank, never did drugs, never looked at porn. Everything's been perfect in your life. And I go, am I correct? You know, just because on the outside, you know, we look at people and we're like, oh, they must have it all going on. And his response was, well, if that was the case, Clark, I don't think I'd be here on your show today. You know? So, you know, I look at you, and you're a beautiful woman, and people probably think, oh, Kimberly's got it going on. You know, she's never struggled, you know, this beautiful blonde. And again, you wouldn't be here if that was the case.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that I realized all my struggles until I was in my 40s. And I was in a bloodless marriage, and I had struggles with my mom and my brother that, you know, you've kind of realized that everything you thought was real really isn't real. And I was epically unhappy, and I couldn't figure out why. I'm like, why? Yeah, I don't really love my husband. But I have 3 beautiful kids, and I have, you know, a great job and a roof over my head and 2 cars in the garage. And why am I this unhappy? And, you know, then you dive right back into, like, you know, your childhood, and you say, wow, none of this was really real. Like, it's the story that my mom told me, or it's not really the reality of what happened. And when you realize that everything kind of is a facade, and then you start remembering how things really went down, you're like, wow, I got some healing to do.
Yeah, I equate it to like peeling an onion. Like you just got to start peeling those layers off to get to the core of the situation that has driven your behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So take me in. Let's get into your what drove Kimberly's behavior. Where were you born? Uh, where were you raised?
I was born and raised in a little suburb of Buffalo, New York, called Cheektowaga. Born and raised there. My mom and dad divorced when I was 2. And the dynamics of that were my dad kind of picked us up every Sunday, and there was no love lost between my mother and my father as far as my mom's, as far as my mom went. She was not a fan of my father. And I think my father had a really difficult time going head to head with her. And I think that my dad just wasn't a really good dad. Like, he just wasn't present. And so I never really had that role model to watch how a man treats a woman and how a woman treats a man and the compromises that are made in a relationship. I didn't know how to compromise. It was my mom's way or the highway. And so when I got into a marriage, I'll own everything that's mine in the marriage. There was a lot that my ex-husband probably, just was inept. I mean, he was raised by alcoholics. But I went into a relationship where I had no idea how to compromise. It was going to be my way or the highway. And I think that throughout that marriage, I did a lot of demasculination in how I manipulated things as a woman, I would just not sign off on things, or I would go distant, or whatever the case may be. It would, I was going to get my way. I was right. I was always right. And that was difficult in a relationship that, you're navigating through with my ex-husband, who didn't have role models. He was raised by 2 alcoholics, and, he didn't really have any coping skills as far as dealing with me. And so we just kind of lived separately. And then when you're in a relationship and you're alone, I think that's more lonely than being in a relation or not in a relationship and feeling lonely, but to not have support from your partner. So
Was there addiction on your side with either of your parents?
no. And that's what's so interesting to me, because I always thought my ex-husband would be in the rooms before me. Absolutely. Like 100%. He was a functioning alcoholic and he doesn't identify as an alcoholic, so I should probably not give him that label. But he was a very heavy drinker. And near the end of the relationship, that's when I started drinking, because I was like, well, if I can't beat him, I'll join him, right? Like, maybe I can connect with him if I sit down and drink with him. I found out very quickly I wasn't a good drinker.
Before we get into that aspect of the marriage, you had described your mom as a communal narcissist to me. What? I don't even really know what that term means. What does that term?
So my mother is like, she loves big. Okay. So when she loves you, you feel like you're being like engulfed in love, right? But it's conditional. And then when you don't sign on, or you don't agree, or things aren't, copacetic, that love is withdrawn. And so when you get that from a parent, where you are no longer in the circle of trust, so to speak, you're not the golden child. And I never was. My brother was always the golden child. But now you're the scapegoat. It was like I lost what I thought was my best friend. And so, yeah, being in a relationship with someone who can effectively just withdraw, like a communal narcissist is someone who is like a philanthropist of sorts. Like, they're always doing good, but they have to be, it's not for the cause, it's for the applause. You can't do anything without being recognized, right? My ex fiance and I believe that we attract these people back into our lives to try and heal the trauma of our past, right? So we track someone who's exactly like this to recreate that relationship to maybe somehow correct it. But he was the exact same way. He would videotape himself on the streets giving sandwiches to the homeless. And like, why can't you just give sandwiches to the homeless? Why do we have to videotape it?
Right, right,
But
right, right.
my mom would buy the best gift, and it would be, she would have to see you open it, and everyone would have to see you open it, and it would be a big deal. And it was never anything you just did and, didn't get accolades for.
Was she jaded from the divorce?
Very much so. And she hated my father. My dad, and pushing forward, my dad took his life. Not a couple of years ago. He took his own life, and I think he just was not one of those people that, when confronted, was good with confrontation. My mom's very good with confrontation. So yeah, he did not handle her well, and she did not she waited until we were a bit older, and that's when she started to say, your dad didn't do this, or your dad didn't show up for that, and your dad didn't pay child support, or your dad. And I found later on that a lot of that, whilst a lot of it had truths to it, I mean, we all have our version of the truth, right? So I have to forgive my mom, because that's how she saw it. She saw men as weak. She saw, and that's why my brother was so enabled all our lives, is, in the golden child, because she couldn't let him fail, because men are weak and she needed to support him. And women have to be strong. She even said it to me. One time she said, well, I had to make you the strong one. You were the female. And I remember just sitting there going, what? Like, why can't we both be made strong? And why can't I mean, I never felt like men were empowered and masculine, and because I grew up believing that men were weak, and that, the woman had to be strong. And so all these things I had to unlearn, later on.
Did you have a relationship with your father after the divorce?
Very little, up until we were probably 16. My dad moved to Florida, and that's when I think my mom started telling us her truth of the relationship. And that's when I think we lost touch with our dad. We didn't really talk to him or speak to him. And I reconnected with him about 9, it had to be 9 or 10 years ago. And that was the ultimate betrayal for my mother. And you know what? And to be 100% honest, part of me reached out to my dad to hurt my mom. So my motives were not completely pure. However, I'm just so grateful I did. And, I think the God has a way of making things the way they're supposed to be. And I think, I really needed to reconnect with my father. And he said to me, he said, Kim, I wasn't a good father. However, I could be a good dad to you, and I could be a good grandpa. And he says, I could be a good dad to you now as an adult, and I could be a good grandpa. And I was like, that could work. And it was beautiful, because like, he admitted and embraced that he wasn't a good dad, that he wasn't present, and that he had a difficult time taking on my mom, and that was too much for him. And then, but he said, well, I can't go back, but let's move forward, and let's see. I know I could be a good grandpa, and I know I could be a good dad now. And I'm like, okay. And that was a beautiful relationship. So I'm really grateful for that time.
And what led into him taking his life?
It was so, it was so avoidable, honestly. So my dad's 6'4", big guy, and he had bad knees. And he retired from the city of Jacksonville, Florida. And he was a very proud man. He hurt his knee. He only had Medicare Part A, not Part B. And he had bone on bone and needed a knee replacement. And that is considered a elective. And so there was a big hoop to do, but he was going to the doctor, paying cash, and they gave him some pain medication until he got Part B implemented into his insurance program, and that he could go and have the surgery. When you go to a pain management specialist, you sign a contract, a pain contract. And they'd given him a bunch of pills. And my dad, I don't think my dad really understood, or I don't know exactly, but I mean, this is not a drug abuser or something like that. They just put him on a really bad routine or regime to manage his pain. And so he was taking like Vicodin 3 times a day. So he would take his 3 tablets. He would wake up in the middle of the night with the sheets wrapped around his knee, and he would take another tablet. And then he did that a bunch of times. And so when he went back to the pain management specialist, they counted his pills and they said, you abused your contract. We can't take care of you anymore. You're on your own. And he says, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, you signed a contract saying you're only going to take these pills and these time. And he says, well, this happened. He goes, well, that's not our problem. Your fault. That's not our fault. You should have called us. And so they sent him home with some Flexeril and told him to figure it out. And so my dad went home and he didn't know exactly how to figure that out, because he was in a lot of pain and he's proud, and he's been a man who's taken care of himself. He can't go to the grocery store. He can't clean his house. He can't do anything because the pain's so bad. And so he calls me and he tells me, this is what happened. And I said, okay, Dad, get on a plane, fly to Arizona. I'm probably one of the most effectively connected nurses in the Valley. I'll figure it out, right? And he said, well, you're going out of town. And I said, well, I'll be back. I'm only going for the weekend. And so, long story short, I had a plan for him to go to the ER, get some more pain medication, come get on a plane and see me. And he, I guess, in the midst of things, it was too much for him to bear. And he had all of his clothes out on the kitchen table at his house. And I know this because when I flew in, I saw it all. But anyway, he wrote a suicide note, crumpled it up, threw it away, wrote it again, and took his life, and mailed it to me and took his life. So he went out in the car and turned on the vehicle and just sat in the garage until he was, asphyxiated with carbon monoxide. And so when I arrived in Florida, I flew to Florida, and I arrived in Florida the morning of my birthday. So I'm trying to figure out how to say goodbye on the day that he brought me into the world. And that was a tough one. But when I got to his house, there was clothes on the kitchen table, the luggage set out. So like he was packing, like you could see the whole scenario play out in his mind. Like he was packing to come to me to figure it out. And then he just couldn't see past his pain. And wow. So there's no food in the house, like, just things that, like you knew that, oh gosh, you could just see the struggle. And that was probably one of the most traumatic and real moments of my life. Thankfully, I was already in recovery, and I had a great support system that, came in, swooped in and said, we got you, and one of my best friends at the time, her brother took his life. And she said, there's no way you're going to Florida alone. And she had an 8-month-old at the time. She's like, my husband and my mom are going to have to figure it out. She got on a plane with me. And I said, Joanna, it's just stuff. It's going to be fine. She goes, baby, it's not just stuff. And I'm going to go with you. You're going to do anything you need to do, and I'm going to do the rest. And that's how that went down. And so that's, and Joanna's in recovery too. And it was one of the most beautiful relationships. And it just showed me how God steps in and puts people in your life exactly where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, who have probably survived the same pain you've survived, right? I'm sure you've come in contact with people who have been through what you've been through. And, they say, I see you. I've been there too. You are not alone. We are in this together. And when you hear that, it's like, okay.
Then you found the other note in the garbage?
when I got there. I found the other note in the trash. And and then a bottle of whiskey on the table that was pretty much empty. And I think Joanna thought that would be a trigger for me, because the first thing she went in, she grabbed the bottle, she threw it in the trash, and she's like, okay, how do I, safeguard this whole situation? She was so beautiful. And actually, the bottle of liquor, the whiskey, actually brought me comfort, because I was like, maybe he wasn't completely in his right mind, or what, maybe he wasn't in as much pain. And I'm like, okay, well, that actually brought me a little bit of comfort. There was no real trigger there. But it was just looking and seeing no food. You could see the empty bottle of whatever pain pills he had, and then he had the Flexeril that still had some in it, and then he had the application for the Medicare Part B, and then the bill for the pain management specialist, all on the desk. And you just saw the whole thing play out, and you just went, oh my gosh, like, to watch the aftermath of somebody's final hours, and just someone you love, and to know that this wasn't your solution. And that he called me before he did it, and he's like, I just can't handle this pain. And I'm like, Dad, get on a plane, come out. And I thought we had a resolution, or some sort of solution to the problem, and he couldn't see past it.
Well, I've had so many suicides, close to me, and they all have like the same thing in common. It's just like a momentary darkness they get into, and they can't see a way out of it. And like every one of them just seems like so tough to grasp that they went to that. Like, your father needed knee replacements, like, but he fell into that dark hole with the pain, and without seeing the path forward, he did what he did. And just like every other suicide, there's been 8 of them in my life, and every one echoes that same sort of temporary black hole, can't see the light out, this is what I'm going to do. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and it's realizing that, when someone's in that dark of a place, that they're not of sound mind. Like, you can't think that they're thinking clearly. So I probably, the awareness that it brought to me is that I have to be kind of hyper aware when someone's in a dark state, that even if they say I'm okay, if it doesn't look okay, maybe you need to double check. So I wish I had called him back that day and said, Dad, I'm just making sure, do you want me to make the reservations for you to get on the plane, or how do you want me to I wish I had called him back. And I can't beat myself up too much, because this was not my plan. So I don't have what people would call like survivor's guilt. I don't have that in any way of like where I'm, I should have done this or I should have done that. But there are some, if I was to do it again, or if I had to see this darkness again, I would handle things differently.
When I got out of prison, one of my biker buddies, he just couldn't do enough for me. And he was very well off, took care of me financially coming out of prison, and just driving me to all my speeches, just wanted to be a part of it with me. And he had problems in his marriage, stepped out of his marriage, got a girlfriend. The day he told his wife he was going to leave for the girlfriend broke up with him after he went to her and said, I just told my wife, and she ended it with him. And then he went back to the wife to say, like, let's talk about this. And she said, oh, there's nothing to talk about. It's over. And in that momentary dark spot, he went out to his garage and hung himself. And it's just like, it just broke my heart. And one of our other friends, when he got this girlfriend, the guy said to him, "Have you talked to Clark? Like to go over this whole scenario you're involved in?" He said, "Oh, I don't want Clark to know, like, because I look up to him and I don't want him to, look down upon me." And I'm like, "Oh, dude, man, like I'm not looking down upon anybody. Like I've epically failed in life, like it's just," and he just, like, just getting sucked into that black pit for a moment. My marriage is over. My girlfriend left me. Life, there's nothing to live for. Yeah, there would be.
Well, and then
Just,
I think that I call them the shackles of shame, right? We can't break those shackles of shame. And if we realize what shame really is, and that, there's healthy guilt and there's healthy, remorse, and shame is a really negative emotion to feel, a really negative like cloak to bear. And when you're shackled with that shame, and it comes a lot with addiction, obviously, but when you're shackled, the shame, the thing that you think you could have changed, it's a deeper darkness than guilt. And coming out of and breaking the shackles of shame is probably one of the most beautiful things I think I see in recovery. And to be able to share a story over and over and over again to kind of lift that shame and say, listen, don't be ashamed. This is like you say, I've done things that I am not proud of, but I'm not shackled by shame. I feel guilty about things, and there's things I would have done differently. But when you watch somebody break through and say, okay, no more shame, that, I've done things, you make amends, you do whatever you have to do to clean up your side of the street, as we call it in the program. And then you walk forward. Like I went from broken, beaten, looking at the ground because I couldn't look you in the eye because I didn't know who I was, to looking you, to be head up, head high. And this is my story. This is who I am. And I know exactly who I am today. And I have no shame. Yeah, I feel like that I was guilty of this and guilty of that, but it molded me into who I am today. And so there is no shame.
like when I researched guilt and shame, the difference, guilt is like what you feel about a single act. Like I did something stupid, I feel guilty about it. Shame is like how you feel about your whole essence as a person, as a being, like worthless.
That's a great word too, essence, because it's true. It's like it's all encompassing.
So you were sober. How long were you sober when your father took his life?
4 years when he took his life.
That could have really set you on a even bigger spiral than you did. A pretty good spiral though.
Oh, I sure did. Yeah, I'm a real alcoholic.
So you're in this marriage. Your husband's a big drinker and he's functional. Like I went to work every day. I could have been up all night doing coke and drinking a bottle of vodka. I'm still going to work the next day. And so I know that mentality, and we sort of think like, I can handle it. I'm going to work every day, so I still got my shit together. You're not feeling the marriage anymore.
Well, it was a long time coming, and neither one of us were. I didn't want everyone to know I'd failed at one of the biggest decisions I had made, right? Like to get married. And so I didn't want to fail at this. I saw failure as, probably the most shameful situation. And so I'm like, well, how can I fix this marriage? Like he drinks all the time. He's always drinking. And that was something that separated us quite a bit. And I'm like, well, why don't I just sit down and have a couple drinks with him? And maybe, that'll work. And
and you decided this at what age? So
40.
You got married in your 20s?
Yeah, married in my 20s.
Mm-hmm. So now you're in your 40s and you're like, all right, I can try to save
40 years old. Yeah.
Save my marriage by joining him.
Yes. And so I was 39 or 40, somewhere around there. And so, the ego is cunning at worst, baffling at best. I mean, like they're just and vicious probably. So my ego wouldn't let me be outdrank. Well, I'm sitting down with someone with 35 years in the field of study, and so I am not going to be outdrank by him. So I'm like, I'm going to keep up, right? And yeah, before I knew it, I was drinking just to get right. And so, that worked for a little bit when we would just sit down and drink together. And, it seemed to be a semblance of a connection, I guess. But very quickly, I got dragged through the mud and into the thick of things with alcohol. And I don't know, or I can't I only drank for a year and a half. And I can tell you, I cannot put my finger on where the switch flipped and where I completely lost control, but I know it happened. I couldn't tell you where or why or how or, or when.
So were you functional like he was, going to work every day?
For a very short period of time. Then it was like I was getting up in the middle of the night to have a shot. Then I was getting in the middle, and when I got up in the morning, I had to have a shot to get right. I remember my first realization that I had lost control is I was walking down the stairs, and I hadn't had a drink, and I all of a sudden started to feel this weird aura come on, and I seized. I fell down and had a seizure. And I got up I knew when I got up that I had a seizure, and I'm like, holy crap, I'm in trouble. Like, as a nurse, I'm thinking to myself, I'm having seizures. I'm someone who's going to seize without alcohol. And these are delirium tremens, part of the DT protocol of you have a problem, right? And I would be shaky if I didn't have a drink too. And so when I had that first seizure, I'm like, I'm in big trouble. But then, of course, the shame stepped in, and I'm like, well, I can't tell anyone. I'm going to try and fix this myself. And trying to get help, and then trying to figure out a way to stop drinking. And, in the big book of AA, it tells you, well, we switched to organic wine. I did all of those things. Everything it says in that book, I did. So we'll only drink on weekends and nights, and I'll wait till I get home, and I won't have a drink in the morning, and I won't do this, and I won't do that. And now I'll only drink, wine. And then that was a thing too. So
let me just interrupt you. Like, all right, you said you only drank heavily for a year and a half.
Yes.
And you had a seizure. How long into that year and a half was the seizure?
Probably a year. The last 6 months were like a circling the toilet. It was awful.
To get to that point after 1 year of joining your husband in his drinking, like, what are we doing? How are we getting to that point of seizing without alcohol? Like, what were you drinking? How often? Like, you're going to work, you're getting home and starting to drink. What are we drinking?
For sure, tequila. Well, it started with margaritas. That was my little drink of choice. So I would have an Ambien to go to sleep, and then I would throw back a margarita. And then the Ambien got a little scary, so I cut that out. Then it was just straight, well, why am I wasting all the calories on the margarita mix, right? Well, just have a couple shots of tequila. And that was when it was like, all of a sudden I'm having 2 shots, 4 shots, 6 shots. And I don't even know. Like, after that, it's a big blur of how much I was really drinking. And I probably would say a fifth, at least, maybe a day. Like, I did my shopping at Costco, so I don't know what a fifth actually looks like. It was so crazy because it was so fast. When they say it's cunning, it's baffling, it's powerful. It was so fast. I can't even tell you. I can't even tell you how many drinks I was having, how long it took. I just know at that end, I was drinking to get right. I was having seizures if I didn't drink. And I remember I went out and I drank and I drove, and I got a super extreme DUI. And I came home from that. My ex-husband was like, okay, we're done.
What does super extreme DUI mean? All I've heard is DUI or not DUI. What's super extreme DUI?
I think it's above a 3. I was a 3.8, almost a 4.0. I almost blew on the DUI, and still walking. And so I remember the police officer pulled me over and he said, "You're not the average person I give a DUI to." Like, he says, "I think you have a problem." And, he says, you're not the belligerent drunk person. He says, "You have some problems." And so he was very nice. Like, I honestly, he didn't have to be as kind as he was. He didn't impound my car. Um, he didn't handcuff me or anything like that. He just put me in the back of the car and just, took me to the police. He didn't put me in a separate room. He could have kept me overnight, all the things. My ex-husband got to the police station and he says, "Your wife has a problem. She needs help." And I'm just grateful that he pulled me over that day and I didn't kill anyone and I didn't kill myself. And I'm so grateful for this police officer, because I could have more to deal with today that I would probably not be able to deal with if I had hurt someone. Because I'll never do things like, I would never get behind the wheel after I drank. Those all come to, not yet, right? So until you do, and then I did, and then I ended up with a super extreme DUI. I had to report myself to the board of nursing, which was no help at all, by the way. Like, they didn't step in until a year after I was sober, and then they wanted to, implement all these, safeguards for me and sanction my license. And I'm like, "You guys, I needed you a year ago. Like, I don't need you today. Like, I had the program of recovery. Like, you stepped in a little late, and I'm good now." But so I had a lot of legal that I had to deal with. So anyway, we come home from the DUI, and my ex-husband says, "No more. You have to pull it together." And I remember he took all the alcohol away, and I don't know how long, that between that moment and the moment that I was in the bathroom. But I had drank probably the rest of what I had in the house that I had hidden, because that's what alcoholics do. We hide our liquor all over the place. It's the most bizarre thing. But yeah, I had bottles hid all over the place. And so I drank the rest of all of that. And then I remember there was nothing left, and he had taken the keys to my car. And I'm standing in the bathroom, and I'm holding a bottle of rubbing alcohol. And I'm thinking, I can't get sober. Like, how much of this can I drink and still live? And that was one of the most, I was so drunk, but that was such a clear moment in my head. Like, I'm like holding this big bottle of rubbing alcohol thinking, how am I going to get it past my nose? Like, I mean, just like, there wasn't an option. There was no option in not drinking it. It was, I can't get sober. I have to have alcohol. Like, it's not an option. And I can't drink anymore, and I can't stop drinking. And I remember holding it, and I'm like, okay, how much of this as a nurse can I drink and still live and not die? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. And I turned up the bottle. And I will tell you that was the most out of body drunk I have ever had in my whole entire life. So when I hear people, and I've worked in recovery for a long time, especially at the little place in Scottsdale that I worked at as the director of nursing. And I hear people come in and say, I drank rubbing alcohol, I drank Listerine, I drank hand sanitizer, and which normally everyone would go, "Oh, wow, I lean in and I go, I know exactly what that feels like." And just I can see the draw to maybe do it again, because it was the deepest, most drunk, toxic, in your head feeling of out of body that I've ever had. And then I remember my ex-husband comes up the stairs after I turn up this bottle, and he comes into the bathroom, and he's like, he's trying to discern what happened here. And then I shit myself, because that's what alcohol, you're not a real alcoholic unless you shit yourself at least once. So, and I tell you this story because the demoralizing humiliation that comes along with this disease, and you see me and I'm put together, and you say, oh, she's beautiful, she's got her life together, she's articulate, she's smart. This disease doesn't care. And when it comes for you, it comes to rape your soul and take your life if you let it. And so, yeah, I remember I did that. He threw me in the shower, and then I ended up in the hospital. And I don't remember a lot of what went on in the hospital either, but I got an infection in my IV, and my IV got infected. I had a fever of 103.5. I went completely septic. My arm blew up, and I was in 2 surgeries to breathe the infection out. And then finally they called in an infectious disease specialist who said, get every line out of her, started me on an oral antibiotic, and the fever finally broke. And I remember, and so I have a scar, it's like 7 inches long. That's all from the infection in the IV that basically almost took my life, but ultimately saved my life.
How so?
The infection left me in the hospital long enough to come to a situation for the God of my understanding, God, to create a situation to bring the people into my life that I needed to be in my life to facilitate my recovery. And so anyway, I came out of this haze of sepsis and fevered, and I finally start to get in my right mind, and the doctor walks in the room, and she starts telling me my lab values. And I looked at her, I go, I'm in renal failure? And she said, you drank poison, you tried to kill yourself. Yes, you're in renal failure. Like, of course you're in renal failure. And that means your kidneys are shutting down, for those who don't know what renal failure is. And I looked at her, and I just began to panic, because all I could think is, I don't understand this disease. You don't understand this disease. And if I don't find someone who does, I'm going to die. And I, laying in bed, broken, just sick, and just thinking to myself, there's no way I can stand up for myself in this moment. And all of a sudden, these words start coming out of my mouth. And they're not me. I promise you, I was too broken to stand up for myself in this moment. And I'm laying in the bed, and I looked at her, and I said, you are not the doctor for me. You're fired. Get out of my room. And I laid back in the bed, and I'm like, oh my God, what did you just say? I don't know where the words came from. They weren't mine. And I can only describe them as God speaking through me. And she flips her hair, and she says, I don't think I'm the doctor for you either. And she saunters out of the room. And I'm laying there thinking, okay, all right. So as a nurse, I understand that I've just fired the doctor, and that the hospital has to find another doctor to take care of me. And so I just started to pray. And I said, God, if you're listening, I don't know why you'd be listening to me, because I don't know why you would have any business with me. I said, but can you please just send someone who understands this disease? I don't want to die. And I just kept praying. And all of a sudden, a few hours later, this doctor walks in my room, and he's in a turban, and his name is Dr. Ball. And he's got the kindest eyes I've ever seen in my whole entire life. And he looks at me, and he says, how's your arm? And it's all wrapped up in it was huge. I'm lucky to have an arm today. And I looked down, and I said, I still have one. And he said, you're going to be okay. And I remember just looking at him and thinking, he's not talking about your arm, Kimberly. He's talking about your life. And so he walked out of the room, and a few minutes later, a woman walks in, and there's some backstory to all of this too, is I am under an alias, okay, at the hospital, because I'm a really big deal in my own mind, and I have a lot of nursing connection in this community, and I don't want anyone to know why I'm in the hospital. I don't want them to know that I'm there and see me on the board and see, alcohol detox or whatever they have up on the board, right? So I'm under an alias, Trish Rogers. One day it'll be my stripper name or something. I don't know. She walks into the room and she's like, "Hi, Trish." And I'm like, it was the first time anyone had smiled at me in almost 2 weeks in the hospital. And I'm thinking, oh, well, she's in the wrong room. Who the hell's Trish? And I'm like, oh, wait, I'm Trish. I'm Trish Rogers, right? So I'm like, that's not my name. And she's like, okay, whatever. So she says, my name's Laura. I'm a social worker, and I have 14 years in recovery, and you can too. And she broke her anonymity and shared a little bit of her story with me, handed me a little blue book of Alcoholics Anonymous and a list of meetings that were close to my house, and said, you need to get to some meetings. And I said, okay. And I got discharged from the hospital. I got my little blue book. I got my list of meetings. I got my arm wrapped up in this incredibly huge dressing. And I get home, and the first thing I do is drive myself to a meeting. And I walk through the doors of AA, and I couldn't even find the front door. Like, I'm walking through like the back door. I'm knocking on it, and I'm like, "Can you let me in?" And they open the door, let me in. They're like, "The door is over there for next time." And so then I spent the next probably 3 months in the rooms every single day, crying, and finding the experience, strength, and hope I needed to stay sober.
You being a nurse, you more than anyone would know the lethal effects of drinking rubbing alcohol, and yet the disease had such control over you. You just went ahead with it anyway.
I cannot explain to you the obsession, compulsion in the addiction of alcoholism, and any probably addiction. It wasn't, being sober wasn't going to be an option. Like, so to say, okay, you're going to drink something that's lethal. Well, it had alcohol in it. Like, that's all my mind could wrap itself around was, this is the only alcohol you have. You need to drink it. And it sounds so crazy. And I know, because as a nurse, I can tell you that if somebody said that to me, I'd be like, wow, this is a special kind of crazy. Yeah. It is. It's a special kind of insanity. Like, when they say that you're an alcoholic addict and your life is unmanageable and that you're insane, it's 100% true. There is a power greater than yourself to return you to sanity. No human power could have restored my sanity. None. Period. There is a power greater than myself, and that one is God. And so and you can call him whatever you want to call him. I don't. For me, you call him Allah, Buddha, the Mother Earth, the divine, the light. The word water will never make you wet. It is the substance. And so call him whatever you want, whatever makes you comfortable.
But I would do the same exact thing. Like, in the middle of the night, I would have done so much coke, my heart would just be, and I'd be like, holy smokes, this is it. And I would take a bunch of Xanax and pain pills and just wash them down, gulping vodka. And, like 20 minutes later, everything's kicking in. I'm like, all right, I might have just done too much Xanax, pain pill, and vodka. I better get some more coke back in me. So the thing I thought I was just going to die from, I'm like, I need more of that right now to counteract what I just did. And it's just like, the obsession is just like insane.
There is no defining it. And when you tell someone that you drank rubbing alcohol, everybody goes, ooh. I'm like, yeah, you don't, like, because you're like, wow, whoa. But when we do intakes in the recovery center, and they would be like, oh, they drank rubbing alcohol, they would drink Listerine. I'm like, that's my girl right there. Send her in. Like, let me talk to her. Bring her to me.
Oh man, you hit a trigger with me when, I can't let you have the stage all by yourself with the rubbing alcohol. I was a hand sanitizer snorter. I would like I would have sinus infection after sinus infection from the Coke. And I'm looking at my Perel hand sanitizer and it kills 99.9% of germs. I'm like, germs, sinus infection, it's all got to be related. So I just be like snorting the hand sanitizer like a maniac.
That's the insanity. That's part of the insanity that your mind tells you, oh, well, okay. And I'm like, and holding that bottle and just saying, how much of this can I drink and still live? You know what I mean? And you're like, okay, how do I get rid of this sinus infection, and still do my Coke? You know what I mean? And still, because me, it was like, how do I get drunk without killing myself? You know what I mean? I'm holding this bottle thinking oh, and the insanity of the thoughts are I don't have a drinking problem. I have a thinking problem. Uh, and I do. And I know that it's not my drinking that's my problem. My drinking became problem born from my solution, right? Because it was my solution. Drinking was my solution to all my problems, my thoughts and emotions. Why are my thoughts and emotions my problem? Because I act on them, right? Not everybody acts on every thought and emotion. Well, this alcoholic does, right? I will douse my whole life in alcohol and light it on fire because that's what an alcoholic does. And so when you see, in recovery, when you see people behaving this way and doing crazy things like drinking hand sanitizer or drinking rubbing alcohol, you go, I see you. I've been there too. And then it's this beacon of hope because you stand in front of someone healed and they're looking at you lost and broken. You're like, you could be me too. I did exactly what you did. I'm you. And to be able to be part of that miracle every single day, I can't be more grateful for the program of recovery because I see miracles every single day where people maybe see, miracles once in a lifetime. And so it's been the most rewarding, fall from grace, I guess, that I've ever experienced. So wouldn't take it back. There was a time when I'd hear somebody say they were a grateful alcoholic. I'd be like, what the freak are you grateful for? I'm in the middle of, going to court for the DUI and, lost my job and, I'm going through a divorce and all these things. Well, how could anybody be grateful? And today I think, oh, I know exactly what they're grateful for.
Yeah, in the midst of the storm, it's tough to feel that gratitude. But then once you get through like all the rubbish of the storm, then you're like, oh man, yeah.
Yeah, when you clear away all the wreckage, they say, right? When you get the 9-step promises and your life starts to make sense again and you're like, okay. And then when I was presented with an opportunity as a nurse to work in addiction recovery, and then I found my home and I was just like, oh my gosh, I get to take everything. Because as a nurse, I can tell you the medical field does not know how to deal with addiction. It doesn't, it has no clue. I went to the hospital to get help. And I remember just being like, this is where I'm supposed to go. I'm sick, and they having no idea how to deal with me, send me to a behavioral health center that wasn't even in my network. And so I get there and they're like, I'm wasted. I'm completely wasted. And they're like, it's going to be $897 a day. And I looked at them and I go, I have insurance. What do you mean $872 a day? And they said, well, you're out of network. And I said, well, why would they send me out of network? And they're like, I don't know, but this is where they send you. I said, well, can you send me someplace that is in network? And they said, well, we can't do that. You have to go home and, look it up on your insurance website and find out someone who is. And I'm like, I remember thinking that was the most overwhelming thought in my whole entire life. I was just like, I'm an alcoholic. My life is unmanageable. I can't go home and look this up. What the hell? I can't, I barely made it to the ER, and I ended up in the ER again a couple weeks later and the same doctor. And the doctor says to me, he goes, I sent you to wherever 2 weeks ago. And he goes, why didn't you, stay? And I said, it was out of network. He goes, well, that's not my problem. And that was when I really kind of understood how, a, you know, judgmental people can be in this disease. And I was guilty of it too, because I didn't drink. So I remember getting people in the hospital. We would socially intubate them, like literally put a tube down their throat so we breathe for them to get them through delirium tremens of alcohol withdrawals. And we would get a week later, have all the alcohol out of their system and send them home, and then see them come back, a month or two later. And I'd be like, why are you back here? We got you through the hard part. And what I didn't understand is that wasn't the hard part. Living life on life's terms was the hard part. So I remember this doctor saying to me, well, that's not my problem. And, I'm like, he said, I sent you there last week. I don't know what you want me to do for you today. And I'm like, I remember thinking, if that was my one chance, I'm dead. Like if that was my only chance to get well, and I blew it because I didn't have $875 a day to get well, I'm dead. Like, but this is the only help out there. And then when I got into addiction, as a nurse, into the recovery field, I thought, the medical field is so broken. They don't even know these resources are out there. They don't even know that these people, that we will come and pick them up from their ER and take them. And had this opportunity been presented to me where I could have spent 30 days in a recovery center and actually got some tools, and not had to white knuckle it, as I did in the rooms. I got sober. I can't complain that way. But if I had known these resources were available, medical professionals don't even know that these resources are available, and that, they're out there, and that people are ready to help. And so that's when I devoted my life to, addiction recovery. And I was like, okay, I'm going to bring some semblance of education to the medical community to say, this is what addiction looks like. Okay. This is what recovery looks like. And this is how we bridge the gap between this and this, and how we become advocates for these people who, are clogging up your ER and the perceivingly unlovable, because we believe they did it to themselves, right? Like, well, you're the one who took the drink, right? So this is a pain in my, in my butt to take care of you, right? Like, because you did this to yourself. And so that's where the shackles of shame come in too. So, it's a difficult disease to love somebody through, because they're manipulative and they're, belligerent and, the perceivingly unlovable. And so when I went to work in the addiction recovery, and I surrounded myself with people and started hiring on BHTs and all the things, I said, how do you love the perceivingly unlovable? That would be one of my questions in an interview. How do you love the perceivingly unlovable? Because they're difficult. And then, one girl said, well, I see my light inside them. And I'm like, I get that. You're my girl. Like, yeah, for sure. You're hired. Because that's what you do. You look for your attributes in them, or even your darkness in them. Like, if you can see, when somebody says they drank rubbing alcohol, I'm like, you come with me. You know what I mean? Like, so I know your struggle, I know your pain. And so I can connect with you on that level, and I can love you from that place. Right.
If you had final words on this journey in life to share with the people, what would be your final words?
You can always start over. There is no, like, I've gone too far. And there's people, I think, that out there that, tapping into what happened with my dad. I think that there's a point where you feel like there's no turning back, that you've gone too far. You've never gone too far. It's never too late to start over. And there is light beyond the darkness.
And it really doesn't matter what age, like I hear people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s that are healing already, and I'm like, man, you're light years ahead of me. I'm in my late 50s, like, and they think, oh, like I've wasted so much time, and and I'm like, you're 20 years ahead of me, and you're already addressing issues. So I'm like, you got plenty of living. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
like I'm in my late 50s. I feel like I'm just starting.
Me too. I'm going to be 52, and I'm like, I feel like I've just started life. Like, the fun's just begun. Right.
Right on. Kimberly, thank you. Thank you for telling the audience how you crapped yourself.
you're welcome. Yeah.
That's what I took away from this conversation. Kimberly crapped herself. That's all I'm going to remember.
Kimberly shit herself, and she's
Yeah.
still here to talk about it.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I've heard over the years a lot of people that drank Listerine, but you're the first rubbing alcohol person
Really?
I've come across. So
Yeah.
so you take the cake there.
Woo! I wouldn't put it in a cake. I wouldn't. Again, no. I wouldn't. It wouldn't be an ingredient that I would mix in
No,
ever
no.
again. But I understand it.
You know, to look at you know, and what you're doing now with your life, people would just think, oh, you know, Kimberly's, you know, always had it going on. And it can affect, like you said, it can affect anyone. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a movie star, a rock star, a rapper, or a nurse. Like, man, addiction gets a hold of you, and that's it.
And you know, there is no one in my life that I've ever come in contact with that, in sharing my story and then saying to them, who in your life has been affected by addiction, and they always have a name. There is no family that's been untouched. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your financial status is. They always have a name. If it's not themselves, it's their sister, their brother, their cousin, or there's never one person I've ever spoke to that said, oh, well, addiction's never touched my family. I don't know anybody. No, that's not said, no one ever. So I think with the more light we bring to it, the more laughter, and being able to tell the story of how, you know, oh, you're not a real alcoholic unless you shit yourself, or, you know, whatever, or, you know, drinking, rubbing alcohol, the more I can break the shackle of shame, the more the conversations happen, right? The more organic we can speak of this conversation without feeling guilty or shameful, and then the more awareness we bring to it.
You know, and I started off the conversation talking about that Episcopal priest. You know, how I joked he was raised in the perfect family, and he said I wouldn't be here. He, you know, he himself became an alcoholic, and you know, just like you had your seizure coming down the stairs. He said, you know, like when he would need a drink, and he'd be up on the altar giving out communion. And he's like, here's a lady that's, you know, elderly lady I've known for years. She's the dearest, sweetest lady. And I'm trying to give her the wafer in communion, and I'm just shaking so bad. And she sees it, and I see it. And we both know why. And I can't stop. And I grab my hand with the other hand and get it to her. Yeah, it was powerful, you know? So it's, and again, it's removing that shame, you know, it can affect all of us. And the shame is, just keeps us in that hole.
It's one of the devil's greatest tools is shame and ego, right? And if he can keep you wrapped up in ego, and if he can keep you wrapped up and shackled in shame, he's got you. And the more we can break through that and be like, okay, I'm no longer, like, let's be honest, okay? You can't shed ego completely, right? She's no longer driving my car. You know, I'd like to have her hog tied in the trunk, but sometimes she's shotgun. So, you know, but she's no longer driving my car. And so, and as far as shame goes, okay, fine. It took me 40 years to learn how to love myself. I do not have that kind of time to convince anybody else. So this is me, right? So love me or leave me, right? Like, so I don't really care anymore what anybody thinks. And this is my story. And this is who shaped what I believe is a beautiful human being today. So, and I'm grateful for it.
Right on. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you.
There you have it, everybody. Shame, addiction, it does not discriminate. Can happen to any one of us. Just get help and start talking about it, and be transparent, and let go of that shame. See you next week.